Hello, I'm Sinta Ebersohn from Get Up and Grow, and we're doing another interview for Deaf Awareness Month. Today, I'm very fortunate to have with me Lochlan McLeod. Lochlan, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Sinta, thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. And welcome to the viewers, and I hope I can provide some informative information.
I'm sure you're going to. As a start, Lochlan, please explain to me and to everybody who's going to be viewing this video how you are using technology to make this possible for us, because I'm a person who can hear and you are a person who is deaf.
Well, I wouldn't technically use the term deaf. I'm very well close to, but I have got technology in my ears that I've got hearing aids that allow me to communicate with the computer, and I can hear you directly in my ears. So I'm streaming live to my ears via Bluetooth. And technology is fairly new, so I'm still getting very new and used to it. I've got to adjust quite drastically. It's a massive change. I've had them only recently fitted as of Monday. They were fitted in. I've had them purchased a while ago without going into the technicalities. I had to wait for new pairs to arrive. And I must admit, there's a whole new world out there. I'm still only on the entry-level setting of this technology. And it's a beautiful world. I mean, there's so much more that I can hear. My friend actually tested it the other day, and he was standing on the opposite side of my house, and he whispered behind his hand like this, and I could actually hear him. It was amazing that I could actually hear what he was saying for the first time in a very long time. There's an exciting world out there for me right now. I'm hearing things I've never heard before.
That is so great to hear. I just want to take a step back and thank you for correcting me, because that's part of the reason why I'm doing these videos. It's so important that people who can hear or who don't have any challenges with their hearing are made aware of the right language and the right behavior that we need to exhibit towards people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And you say you are not deaf. So how do you describe yourself?
So I'm definitely hard of hearing. I'm well onto the way of becoming deaf. As I age and get older, my hearing is degrading. It's been degrading from a very young age, though most of my hearing was lost at a very, very young age. So the growth period of not being able to hear, it's for me, I'm fortunate, and I say this with the utmost respect, because there are definitely different levels of being deaf out there. And it starts with hard of hearing, and there are people that are moderately to severely deaf, or they are permanently deaf. I'm in between moderate and severe. My left ear is predominantly more deaf than my right. And it's been a hindering disability for most of my life. It's affected my speech. I speak well now because I've been laughed at plenty of my life because I couldn't pronounce things correctly. What I would hear was definitely not what was being said. Even songs, music, I would sing lyrics that would mean something completely different to what the song is actually singing, because that's what I'm hearing. I can't hear different tones. Certain tones I cannot hear, and that's the new world that I've woken up to now. With the fortunality of technology, I can hear that world out there. I can hear the birds again. I can hear the high tone pitches that I was never able to hear before. So yes, it's been a very interesting life growing up not being able to hear. It's been challenging because, as we know, kids can be incredibly mean, and I was isolated a lot as a child, a lot because we lost each other there for a second.
Yeah, we're back. That's fine. Let's just carry on. You did say you were isolated as a child a lot because of...
Yeah, as we know, kids can be quite mean. And so I was definitely isolated and ostracized as a child because of my inability to speak, or because I spoke funny, or my inability to hear, rather. So it did hinder my speech. It hindered my schooling. I didn't do well academically at school because I couldn't hear correctly. I had to sit at the front of the class. Being a child of high energy as well, it was very difficult to concentrate, and being lack of hearing requires a lot of concentration. for me to be able to hear the people around me, and especially in a classroom where there's an echo, or in a hall where there's sound disturbances, it's very difficult for me to hear and understand what you're trying to say.
Wow. Well, I can imagine how challenging that must be. And it's just a very harsh reminder for me to be grateful for something that I actually take for granted, and something that I think most of us who can hear take for granted without ever thinking about it. I can hear everything that goes around, or at least I think I can. I imagine I can. So I'm quite fascinated by the level of hearing that you have with your hearing aids now. And I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about that in a minute. But can we take some time and tell us your story about how it happened that you lost your hearing?
So I was born into this world quite weak to infections and to bacteria. I was lactose intolerant, was one of the main reasons for a issue of postnasal drip, which had a lot of bacteria in it. And growing up as a child, I've come close to my life a few times from birth. I mean, at the age of, I think it was 3 or 4 months, my mum told me the story of where I came 5 minutes of my life because of lactose. My mum gave me milk. We then tried soya milk, similar situation. But I must admit, my lack of hearing is mainly caused by my own fault, because I enjoyed dairy so much that I actually snuck it into my diet when mum took it away from me. Chocolates and sweets and dairy and cream and ice cream and all the beauties of the world as a child you want to taste, I was deprived of. So I definitely took advantage when I could. Unfortunately, it did create this bacteria postnasal drip that dripped down into my throat and leaked into my ear canals and ate away at my eardrums. It's been a degrading issue from a young age. I mean, I lost my hearing, or I lost the 35% of my hearing in my left ear, and I've lost 75% of hearing in my left ear and 25% of hearing in my right ear. And it was from the age, I would say about 4 years, 5 years old. Maybe even 7 is when they actually qualified me as severely deaf in my left ear. They wanted to give me hearing aids at that age, and we can understand that the technology at that time was much more bulkier. It was invasive. It was uncomfortable. And as a child, and again, growing up in a world where I was already being isolated and ostracized, I didn't want to be any more different in this world that I was already different in. So I didn't want to give away that I had a disability. So I tried to learn how to hear in ways that didn't give away the fact that I was deaf or that I couldn't hear properly. So I tried incredibly hard to speak properly. It's one of the reasons why I don't have a thick South African accent. I've tried to learn how to pronounce words correctly, I've tried incredibly hard. And it became very difficult. I mean, as I said, it hindered a lot of my school career. Nowadays that I had been able to adapt because it was such a young age of losing my hearing. I was then able to adapt a lot faster than most. I mean, your brain at a young age it's a sponge waiting to be saturated with information. And because I couldn't hear, I had to saturate with other things, and that was how to hear without that. So I used to learn how I started meditating at a young age. I used to how to focus my energy or my attention to the energy around me so that I could hear without hearing. I could become aware of things behind me without hearing them. I could be aware of vibrations through the floor, in the air, through my skin. I became more sensitive. So in some ways where I lost my hearing, I became hypersensitive in other things that most people who can hear don't have the ability to do. So I have been very fortunate in that regard, is that my eyesight is phenomenal, my sense and feeling is phenomenal, and my intuition is incredibly good as well, because I've had to rely on instinct rather than my senses to get me through life.
Very interesting. I've heard often that people's senses are developed much better. You know, the other senses, if one of the senses aren't fully operational. But it's fascinating, and I'd love to learn more about, things that you can do. Like you said, you become more aware of things behind you without even being able to see them. You sense the presence. Is it the heat? Is it the energy? What is it that you pick up on?
You feel the presence. You just it's very difficult. Excuse me. It's very difficult to explain because it's almost like a dense energy. You feel the energy. You can feel something behind you when something's around you, when something's moving. And I used to practice by closing my eyes and trying to sense by limiting my senses because I couldn't hear anyway. So when I closed my eyes, I went into this dark void of nothing. And there were certain sounds that just completely disappear. So I blacked out the world. And I was able to tap into certain senses that I wasn't able to tap into because of my other senses taking control. So or rather not emphasized, amplified those senses. So that energy it is energy that you can sense. Like my friends hate it because I love pranking people. So I like to give a little bit of frights here and there. And I'm that kind of friend. So my
So I'm
friends,
sure you have a couple of cool party tricks up your sleeve, eh?
yeah, definitely. And my friends try and get me back, but they can't frighten me or catch me out of being aware. I'm constantly conscious of what's around me. And it's a good thing and a bad thing in many ways. Yeah.
Fascinating, fascinating. Lochlan, I'm so grateful for having this conversation with you. There's so much to learn from your situation. You mentioned being ostracized, I'm sure being bullied because you don't hear everything that's going on. And that you also then, you mentioned that you spoke funny because you had to kind of put the words together yourself and make assumptions of how things were based on what you could hear.
Correct.
How does a child deal with that? I'm sure at different ages it's also different, but there comes a time, especially when we're teenagers, when our social lives are extremely important to us. And I can only imagine the challenges that you would have had to deal with. Can you tell us more about that?
Look, it's quite a sensitive topic, to be honest. I mean, there was a lot of trauma that I went through as a child. I mean, it was I only ever really had one good friend through most of my childhood school, except for high school. Things started to change a little bit, but during primary school was the hardest time. I mean, that's where kids can be the meanest. I think in them finding themselves in this very difficult world, they become very nasty, especially to those that might seem weaker. So, and I was a very small, petite kind of male. I wasn't ever this bulky, massive, masculine male. So I did get ostracized, and I wasn't able to fight back in the way that I would have been able to have gained some form of popularity or recognition. So I did return and reclude myself into the backgrounds, and into the darkness. So I did live a very isolated time. That people didn't like that I couldn't speak the correct terms, or they'd laugh at me, and I didn't like being laughed at. So then I'd pull myself out, and it killed my confidence. For a long time, I wouldn't be able to do something like this, where I could speak about this to someone else, or to stand up in public and have a conversation. I've had to do a lot of work over the years to learn how to be in public because I was so afraid of being laughed at. And it's actually one of the most recent lessons that I've actually learned is how to not be nervous standing up in public, or to have a conversation with you on the other side there. I'm still a little bit nervous now standing here in front of you, or sitting here in front of you, discussing about my history, because again, I'm so petrified of making a mistake, or not pronouncing the correct word, and the worst of this would be online for the rest of my life, you know. So
Well,
yeah.
here you are, and I want to acknowledge what you're doing and also honor you for being here and sharing your story. Well done.
Thank you.
Being ridiculed is, I think, a biggest fear for most of us. So, yeah, kudos to you. And
Bless you. Thank
here
you.
you are. And it's great that you share this because, as you said, and rightfully so, most people will not talk about it. Most of us will suffer in silence, and you're
Yeah.
brave, and I want to honor you for that. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the acknowledgement. It's a lot of
So
effort to be confident.
yes, yes, it's true, and that's your life journey and the lessons that you're learning from your experience. And this Get Up and Grow initiative that I have, what we're doing this deaf awareness interview for, is all about learning and cultivating resilience through the experiences that life offers us. We have all kinds of adversities that we face, and hardships, and even traumatic experiences. Yeah. And I'm very passionate about teaching people to identify the life lessons that those experiences offer us. And when we learn them and integrate them into our lives, and it becomes part of our personal development, we thrive. And that's why I do what I do. So here we are, and that's what we're doing here. And you doing an excellent job of sharing your life lessons with us.
Thank you. I'd love to share more about the fact of the ripple effect that has around being hard of hearing, and especially even in homes where you think that family and people around you would be considerate or understanding about it. I grew up in a very different background where I don't know how to do it without being a poor me factor. That's not what I want to get across. It was more of a lack of attention, if you will, or a lack of love, if you want to call it that. Mum was a very hard woman. And because I couldn't hear properly, I would spend most of my time going, sorry, what? Excuse me, And I'd do it 6-7 times before I would actually then process what the person was trying to say to me. And people don't like repetition. It gets frustrating repeating the same thing. It's one of the things I suffer with because of that is I'm impatient when I have to repeat myself. And I'm learning how to break that cycle because it was instilled to me as a young age. But there's this massive ripple effect around it. Your parents get irritable with you. You can't hear people. People get irritable with you. And you just fall backward. And then even up until now, I still struggle with words or songs that I've never heard before. I pronounce things the wrong way. And my lady friend, my girlfriend, actually thinks it's quite cute that I pronounce things different to most other people. But it's an actual hindrance. It's something that I'm still learning how to adapt to, and the hearing aids are going to hopefully help me with that now, so that I am able to hear the world out there that I've completely ignored or neglected, or rather not even any of the above, because it wasn't my choice, is that I haven't been able to hear it. So yeah, there's this massive ripple effect around it that just, it's not just the fact that you just can't hear, it's that it affects everyone around you, and it affects how they look at you, and affects the relationships you have with those people. So not only was I isolated at school, I was isolated at home. I lived in a dark world because you can't hear what's going on around you. You're not in the know-how. You can't know certain things or hear certain things. So you're left in the dark 90% of the time. And people don't want to go through the effort of having to repeat themselves to you so they 90% of the time they don't want to include you, is basically what I'm getting at. So yeah, there's this very traumatic experience around it. And even though I could still hear, I couldn't hear properly. So I made a fool of myself. I feel terribly sorry for those who have grown up with a completely deaf world. I mean, my family wouldn't even consider doing sign language. So, and if I was completely deaf, I would have been really, excuse my language, screwed in this world. My parents wouldn't have learned how to do sign language to assist me. My sister would have just laughed at me and not wanted to learn sign language. And that's one of the things that I couldn't do. It's why I don't speak with sign language. But you'll notice when you do speak with me, I speak a lot with my hands. I'm very, physical with my language, because it helps me emphasize what I'm trying to get across. And that's, again, it's learned from not being able to hear. So yeah, it's a very scary world out there for someone who can't hear. And I acknowledge those there that are permanently deaf, that even hearing aids can't even assist them. I feel terribly sorry for them trying to navigate through this life, because it's a very lonely life. And people can be incredibly mean, judgmental, and impatient, especially if they don't understand. I mean, they're not aware of what you're going through. I mean, everyone's going through a whole journey of their own, so you can't expect them to be understanding without knowing. I mean, you've got to. Hence, why this is very important, because it's nice that people like yourself can understand what someone like me is actually going through. And it's rough. It's a tough, rough world out there for someone who has an inability of any sort, or disability, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a cruel world. And I imagine, yeah, there are so many ways that you can be isolated or excluded. And those are things that we as humans actually
Take
need
for
protection
granted.
from, because those are part of our basic needs, is to belong somewhere and to be part of a group where we
And we
feel
take
safe.
it for granted because we naturally expect it. And when someone like myself tries to explain it to someone, it's very difficult to understand because you don't experience it. You know, it's people experience it in their own ways, granted, but when you have a physical disability or something that actually hinders you, whether it be a missing limb or being in a wheelchair or being deaf or being autistic or having some form of disability, it's a lonely, lonely world out there, and not many people are willing to hold your hand in the process, and not many people want to be around.
So if I can ask, it
You.
looks like,
It's a tough, tough world. It really is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if I can ask, did you grow up with anybody else in your life that had any hearing challenges, or were you the only person?
My father actually is also very hard of hearing. He has been also just recently diagnosed as permanently deaf. Well, not permanently. He can still hear, but he's now disabled. He's gone past the threshold of moderate and severe. He's gone into disability. As I said, there were different levels of deaf. Someone who has been through this process will understand. It's you from hearing you get moderate, severe, deaf, and then disabled. There's a level beyond that. So, and my dad's just reached that. And I laugh at it because I'm allowed to. I'm in the same position. You're not allowed to laugh. I'm kidding. So yeah, it's I grew up with him in the life where we both couldn't hear. There was a world out there that we couldn't really understand. But my father is not really the emotional kind of person, so we didn't really share our experience with one another. He was also, my parents were divorced from a very young age. So I only saw my father once a year in the beginning when they lived so far apart. And he became a little bit of my idol. I tried to be more like him because I associated with him, because we couldn't hear, because he was the only male in my family. I grew up with my mom and my sister, my grand, so he was the only male influence. And when I did get to see him, I idolized him. So I studied the same things. I went to the same school. I tried to follow in his footsteps. Though I was nothing like him. I'm obviously not. Very different people. He was this big, strong man. I was this tiny, small man, and I expected so much of myself. But yeah, we did try and share a common interest of our lack of hearing, but we didn't. It didn't help for the factor that, yeah, he wasn't involved in most of the time that I couldn't hear.
Okay. So there's,
Yeah,
not a lot of support for a person in your situation.
very little,
Yeah. Wow.
very little support.
You talked about school. Did you go to mainstream schools?
Correct. My parents wanted me again, as a image factor. They didn't want to have a disabled person or a child. They wanted me to go to a proper academic school, and they obviously put in special requisites that I would sit in the front of the classes, and they would make sure that were possible in every single class, and they wouldn't allow me to sit at the back, and make sure that I was in a class that would be more susceptible to um, education rather than the class of rebels. But that soon changed because I kind of rebelled.
You're going to have to tell us a bit about that.
I think we're freezing there. I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah,
There we go.
let's just carry on. That's technology these days. We're in and out, and it's up and down, and we'll just carry on. At the end
Yeah,
of the day,
unfortunately.
we'll get the interview done.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. So,
So again,
so
I'm not sure what you heard there.
Lochlan, you said he rebelled and then you started laughing, and I just laughed along with you. And I said,
Okay,
you're going to have
okay,
to
so you heard that, right?
tell us an interesting story. So he said, I've got this picture in my mind now of the party tricks and that kind of friend that you are. So I'm curious to know, how do you prank people? Do you actually use your hearing or your lack of hearing as a means to prank people?
Yes, yes and no. Oh, my bandwidth seems to be a bit low here. Sorry, my internet is going down. Can you still hear me there?
I can hear you, yes. You're still moving.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah, look, I love to frighten people, so I'd use my ability to be quiet because of my inability to, or my inability to hear. I have to walk more quietly so that I can be more aware of the things around me, so I don't interrupt the things with me. So I'm a very sneaky kind of person. So I do sneak around. Sometimes I scare people without even intending to do it. I just I'm there or I'm just not there, or I'm not there and then just there. And so that's yeah, I do take advantage of the fact that I can't hear. I do like to um, try and like my roommate doesn't like it. I do every now and then try and drop his hand into warm water, or just to play little tricks here and there, or just to misplace something, or just to hide something. I like to joke, you know. I like to think I'm a funny person. Whether that's true or not, I don't really care. I'm having a good time. I laugh.
Yeah,
Not, I
that's
try not
great.
to hurt anyone in the process.
Mm. Well, I'm very glad that you have a great sense of humor, and after you've also talked about the traumatic experiences in your childhood, and a sense of humor is a good thing. And I was just thinking that I suppose if people around me knew that I couldn't hear that well, I would use it as an opportunity to sometimes just tune out when I'm not interested or I don't really want to know what's going on, and just be in my own world, and they wouldn't know whether it's for real or not. So I would I would be a pretty good prankster myself, to be honest.
I do that, exactly that. And it's been very difficult in relationships because also being male, and I'm generalizing this factor, us men are very difficult to speak to or with. We do have a very short attention span. So in my past relationships, one of my exes did actually say to me that I missed most of the relationship because most of the relationship I actually didn't hear or listen to. Because it would just go straight over my head. And instead of having the energy to pursue what her repetition, I just ignored it. And there's a lot of experiences out there that I didn't pay attention to. And again, that lack of attention to detail affects everything else as well, because you then start losing your ability to be aware of the other things. You start lose falling into the hole. And the work that I put into being aware of the things around me that I could hear, I started to lose because I stopped practicing. So there've been lots of these phases that I've gone through, these up and down phases where, yeah, you have to continuously be aware of what you're doing. You have to continually work at it so that you can perfect it at the end of the day, or to continue to do it. So the super ability of feeling things actually is a learned behavior, and you can unlearn it. And that's the problem. If you don't practice it, you unlearn it. So yeah, my journey of life through the traumas that I have been going through, going back a step there, you commented on my ability to joke and laugh about it. That's been one of my coping mechanisms. It's also one of my masks, is that I will continue to try and smile. I always try and put a smile on my face. And being used to trauma, because I have had a very traumatic upbringing, a lot of trauma in my life, many different stories, has allowed me to be comfortable in my what most people would think is a form of weakness, which is actually a strength, is to acknowledge your weakness, or not your weakness, but your emotion. I'm very aware of my emotions. I'm very expressive with my emotions, but I give it a time and a place. I don't ever bottle anything up. And trauma has allowed me to learn that technique. And being constantly presented with the trauma, I've had to learn a tool to be normal, as more normal as I possibly could be in this very insane world.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm still stuck at when I heard you earlier that saying in a previous relationship, somebody said that you missed most of the relationship. That must be so hard to hear, knowing that you make so much effort and you work so hard to not miss things, and yet it's kind of unavoidable when your hearing is not
Yes.
what the other person's hearing is. But and it also reminds me of how different we need to interact with people who don't hear well, who don't hear at all. And that is that we need to be able to see faces and make eye contact and see the lips if you need to read the lips. So we can't, I suppose your interaction with someone on an intimate level of close up is very different, because you can't not communicate well if you're not looking at each other.
That's correct. That's very correct. My best times, like most, this is a male joke. Forgive me. I don't mean to be sexist in any way or form. It's just my dad, it was one of my dad's favorite jokes, is how women can talk a lot more than men in most cases. They can have a lot more of a, and again, I don't mean any insult here, so please don't, no one come at me on this regard. It's humor. And most husbands tend to say that they wish they could have hearing aids, that they could just switch off because to shut off once in a while. So yeah, there have been benefits of not being able to hear for those out there that can understand.
Yeah, I can imagine. But then research has shown that in general, most women actually have literally thousands more words a day that they need to get out than most men do. So yeah,
I'm so glad that that's coming from a professional's mouth.
You're safe. You're safe. Don't worry. So Lochlan, tell us about your new hearing aids. And I just want to make sure, is this the first time now in your life that you have hearing aids? I know you've been on a trial and error basis with him for a couple of weeks. Tell us about them. How does
Yes.
how did that change, or how is that changing your life?
I wish I'd done it sooner, for multiple reasons. One of them is for the fact that it would have been a lot easier to adapt to them if I'd started earlier. Because right now I'm relearning sounds that I've unlearned because of the time frame that I'd stopped hearing them for. So there's a lot of new sounds coming in. I'm adjusting. I'm still at the second level. I've still got to turn it up to the third level once I've become accustomed to this. And even now, when they first put them in, it was a big change. The sounds that I'd amplified on my own, I mean, louder, or you become more focused on those sounds. Your brain adapts to hear those sounds that it can hear. So when I had these put in, those sounds were now amplified. So there was this big, loud world out there. When I first had them fitted, I felt like, when you get a puppy and you're taking the puppy for a walk, and you go on the road and there's cars going past and the puppy gets all nervous and it looks left and right like this, and it's got a world. That's exactly how I felt when I had these hearing aids put in the first time. There was this loud, massive world around me that was so loud. It was so loud. Even my own voice was incredibly loud. I had to whisper at myself because it was scary. It was so scary.
Wow.
And I work in a very noisy environment as well. I mean, being a tradesman, I've got my own electrical company and around power tools constantly, and these noisy environments. Without the hearing aids, I had become accustomed to those noises and vibrations. Now there's so much more. They're amplified and they're massive, and I spend my time doing this, because there's all these random sounds and bangs and bashes and bombs and yeah, you name it. It's a very interesting world.
Wow. Yeah,
But
it seems like you might feel like you're in a war zone all of a sudden, because everything is loud that they were never there before, hey?
Correct. But now on the equal opposite side, when I go to take my dog for a walk out into the bush, when I get over the roadsides, I get over the fact of the noises, and then I can go into the bush and hear the bush life that I've been missing for a very long time. I can hear certain birds that I'd stopped hearing. I can hear the crickets again. I can hear the rustling of things in the bushes. I can all of those sort of things that I've been missing for so many years, I can finally hear again. So the world is it's both scary, but it's beautiful. There's a world that you can't believe what you're missing, even like how your hearing relates to your sight. Because once you hear something, you're aware of it, you can see it. If you don't hear it, you don't see it, or sometimes the other way around. But generally, it's the latter, you know. So, um, yeah, there's a world out there that I'm experienced that I've never seen before, never heard before, and it's beautiful. So yeah, the journey is beautiful.
Wow. Yeah, that is beautiful. So you're on a whole new journey of discovery, which is absolutely amazing. Thank
100%.
goodness for technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. Lochlan, one last question. How
Sure.
would you want other people to treat you? I actually have
With
two questions,
patience.
if I may. Let me take a step back. The first question I want to ask you is, do you tell people, new people that you meet, do you declare that you're struggling with your hearing, or do you not say anything? Do you see what happens? Do you go with the flow until it becomes necessary for you to say? How do you behave?
I missed the first part of that question, which was the main part of the question there. What was the when I'm where?
Okay. How do you behave or act when you meet new people? Do you declare that you struggle with your hearing, or do you have a challenge, or do you not say anything? Do you go with the flow and see how it happens and maybe only say something when it becomes necessary? What do you normally do?
I exactly that the last that you said there. I usually wait until it's necessary for me to say something. So if I meet someone new that's not aware of my inability or my disability, I've learned to adapt into this world, and it's not fair on me to inflict that onto others. My journey in this world was to learn to live without my hearing. It's not there for me to educate other people on. If I can be honest, the only thing that I would expect from other people in this world is patience, because each and every one of us are going through a journey of our own, and especially someone with a disability, your patience is at the utmost appreciated, because it's a very lonely world if you can't hear and if you've got lack of patience, because you'll ignore that person, or you'll pull away. Don't do that. Have the patience for people in the world and be a little bit kinder, because people out there need people. We need company. We need love. We need appreciation, and recognition. And just because someone can't hear, or even more so, because someone can't hear, you should be more compassionate, be more patient, more understanding. And that's the only expectation I have of the world, without me in expecting them to do or change their life. I mean, they don't have to change. It's my problem to change, or to adapt, should I rather say, to adapt to the inability.
I love that you use the word inability instead of disability. That is really beautiful to me. And it's merely an inability. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be a disability. And I know in the deaf world, I partnered earlier this month with the National Institute for the Deaf, and we created an infographic with things that hearing people need to know about deaf people. And the first thing on the list on the infographic was that deafness is not a disability, it's a culture.
yeah.
And that to me was so beautiful, because it's merely an inability, and we have so many other things that we're still able to do. So I love that about it. And then, yeah, patience is a theme that keeps on coming up everywhere where I deal with people who are deaf. It's one of my passion projects. So I'm constantly working with deaf people. And every year in September, I do something special. And patience is a thing that comes up all the time. And I want to add to that understanding. And you also mentioned compassion. if we can just have the compassion for everybody else, because that's something we all need and we all want in
With
return as
compassion
well.
will come patience and everything else.
Yes,
That will naturally roll in.
so true, so true. Well, I'm very grateful for having had this conversation with you. If there's one big thing that you can say to anybody else out there who is losing their hearing, or who is struggling to hear, what would you say to them?
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. This world can be extremely scary as it is. And now that you're losing hearing, um, there is something beautiful through the process of being able to adapt and to try and be resilient. I like challenges in life. I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to get over a lot of traumas in my life, because I like to be challenged. If there's no challenge, there's no purpose. You know, I mean, I like a goal and an achievement, to get a sense of achievement. So don't be scared of this new profound inability, because again, and I use the word inability because words are spells, and we cast them daily. And the irony that I can't hear, but yet I speak of words. Be scared of this dark, scary world that is already there. You're just adapting. There's so much more out there that you will learn to do with it. And you can use it to either make you or you can use it to break you. And I hope that someone can take this lesson and learn that it can, the building you can be actually better than breaking you. There is something beautiful in it.
Thank you so much. That is profound. It can either break you or make you, and don't be scared.
Mm.
And I think it must be scary as hell to lose your hearing. It's something that I take for granted completely. So yeah, lots to think about.
That's one of
Lochlan,
the
thank you
reasons.
so much.
One of the reasons. One of the reasons why I'm petrified of losing sight is because I've lost my hearing, and my sight is one of the only senses I have left that I've used to adapt to. So I appreciate ability or disability or however you wish to call it. I really, my hat goes out to you. My heart goes out to you. My hat comes off. It's a very tough world out there. But again, everyone's suffering out there. It's not a suffering. You've just got to adapt. And once you've adapted, the world is not so scary, not so dark, and not so lonely. I've managed to turn my life around coming later into life. I managed to become more popular, got more friends, and that was without hearing aids. That was just by adapting in this world, just by learning from the trauma that I've gone through, not only just that, but also learning to adapt with the trauma that I have, and adapting with the inability. So yeah, the journey is scary, but it's beautiful. The world out there is it's tough as it is. So don't expect too much from yourself, because that's a little bit of a psychological learning curve. Because if you expect too much, you put too much on your shoulders, and you're not able to deal with the root cause, which is the fact that you're losing your hearing or you have lost it. So adapt, learn, and don't be scared of the lesson. It's a lesson nonetheless.
Well, I'm inspired. Thank you very much. And I'm deeply grateful for having all my senses and, being able to rely on them as much as I do. Lochlan, thank you so much. This has been great. And I
Thank
hope
you.
that we can talk again soon. And in the meantime, please take care.
Thank you, Sinta. I really appreciate this, and thank you for inviting me.